Faut vraiment en boire beaucoup? Tout un verre?
Mais oui. Aujourd'hui, en avril 1905, c'est ce que nous avons trouvé de mieux pour guérir l'anémie. Buvez, mon petit. Ça vous redonnera des couleurs.
Mais ce club, quelles sont ses activités?
Vous verrez. Vous verrez. Disons à minuit.
Ah, minuit. Satan. La mort.
Hello, and welcome to Comic Book Bears Presents The Bear Cave of Terror. I'm your hairy, heavy homo and horror fan host, Steve Morey. Each week here in the Bear Cave, I invite a horror-loving guest who brings with them some of their favorite scary movies. It can be a classic, gory, trashy, obscure, well-known, French, or something possibly still banned in Britain. In other words, a thrilling work of cinematic terror that we think you might enjoy. In each episode, we'll dig into the flesh and bone of the film, highlighting our favorite scary moments, as well as stories and details from beyond the screen. All while our guest imparts their deep and possibly concerning love for this week's frightful vision unto you, our dear listener. And joining me in the Bear Cave for the first time is Mr. Sam Lenz. Sam, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here in the Bear Cave of Terror.
It's so spooky and scary. So, Sam, tell us about yourself. What got you into horror, and what would, say, listeners know you from?
So I co-host Screams from the Basement with my esteemed co-host Casey Kelderman. We're a couple of horror-loving friends who just talked horror all the time, and we're like, we should just start a podcast where we do this. As far as like where my love of horror came from, I did not come from a horror family at all. My parents were staunchly not horror people, which is probably why I sought it out a lot. One of my earliest horror memories is crying through the end of Ghostbusters because it scared me so bad as a child, and now it's one of my favorite movies of all time. But yeah, it kind of became a thing where I in middle school and high school, I started hanging out with friends who were super into horror, and I'd go over to their houses and like they'd rent movies, and it was always horror movies. And so if I wanted to hang with my friends, I had to get the shit scared out of me. So yeah, it kind of became a thing where, every weekend I'd go over to a friend's house on a Friday night, and we'd watch whatever we could pick up from the video store. It carried with me into adulthood, and I love it. I love horror. Sci-fi was my first love, horror is my second. I still feel like I'm a novice in horror. There's still things that I'm discovering and learning about, and still like huge blind spots for me, and I'm just enjoying getting to go through all of these as an adult that now doesn't cry through the back half of horror comedies.
I actually feel the same way. There are so many times where, somebody will suggest a movie to me or talk about a movie that they love so much, and I'm like, I have never heard of this movie. Like, why have I not seen it? Like, what's up with me on this? And that's kind of one of the reasons why I started this podcast, because it gave me a reason to actually say, you know what? I'm not putting it off. This person loves the movie. I'm going to watch the movie too and figure out like, hey, what do they see in it? Like, what makes it so great for them? Most of the time, I've been loving everything that somebody has brought onto the show. And that kind of leads me to this movie today that we're talking about. And it's a French horror film, which is a huge blind spot for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So Fascination from 1979. It's a movie. It's funny when we were talking about what like our mutual friend John Runyon introduced us, and we were talking about, what movies would you want to come on and talk about? And it was funny when you messaged me, I had just discovered the work of Jean Rollin. Like, Shudder had just added a bunch of his movies, and they all had these wild titles like The Grapes of Death and The Nude Vampire. And I was like, what is this? Like all of a sudden, all these thumbnails were appearing on my Shudder homepage, and I was fascinated by them. I started looking into the guy, and one of the like big titles that everybody was talking about was Fascination, and the thumbnail was, Brigitte Lahaye with wielding a scythe with a, black robe on, and I was just like, yeah, I'm in. What, like, this looks crazy. And it's nuts. And so, I wouldn't say I'm an expert on French horror. It is something that I have been dabbling in more and more over the last, like, I'd say 2 years or so. But yeah, this kind of movie is just becoming a passion of mine, honestly. These like kind of avant-garde things that you don't see being made in the States, I don't know. There's something about international film that just feels so refreshing to me after having seen like a lot of the major like American cinema. Looking at other countries for what they're doing is always, I don't know, something that I'm fascinated in now. So I keep saying fascinated now. I can't stop. It's not intentional.
No, but I mean, hey, we got the movie is Fascination, and honestly, I have been fascinated myself with it since I watched it. I have to say right off the bat, I loved it. I had no idea what to expect, and I think that's kind of the best way to go in to a movie like this. Is just close your eyes. Wait until the credits, until like the screen opens, and then open them and experience. And what an experience it was.
Yes.
Really, really a great experience watching it. So did you want to sort of give a quick sort of overview of what the movie is about? If you can even say what this movie is about.
Yeah, it's pretty light on plot and heavy on vibes, I feel like, but if it's about a criminal who double crosses his team of bandits and goes on the run and hides out in this empty chateau, this abandoned chateau that only has 2 chambermaids hanging out there. And these 2 beautiful chambermaids that kind of intrigue him, and they're getting him to stay using their sexual wiles as the movie progresses. And, his bandits catch up to him outside the chateau, and he's kind of trapped in this house with these 2 women who are telling him that things are going to happen at night when the rest of their group comes. And it's kind of a mystery up until the end. And then it all kind of starts sort of coming together a little bit. It mostly makes sense by the end. There's a little ambiguity there.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of gaps that the viewer kind of has to fill in.
Yeah.
As to like the why, the what's happening. And yeah, at the end they kind of Elizabeth basically kind of explains the whole thing at the very end to Mark the bandit. But yeah, it's really interesting. And I think for me watching this, especially with like the way that Jean Rollin kind of makes his scenes, sets up the shots, and directing the action is kind of maybe a little bit too much to what he does. He just kind of sets the camera there, and what happens, especially the opening shot. It's just, seeing that was just gorgeous. It brought to mind like a lot of different tableau from like other contemporary European filmmakers. I mentioned Fassbinder before we started talking, and like there's something kind of Fassbinder-ish. Rollin sets up a shot, and the opening shot is basically this woman dressed in white, in like early 1900s dress with a big hat, just stark white, standing in the middle of a bloody abattoir. Hunks of cow just hanging.
Yeah.
There's chunks of like flesh on the ground, blood everywhere. The whole room is huge, and she's just this tiny piece standing in the middle, and the camera just sits on it for several minutes with nothing happening.
You don't know who it is. You don't know what the context is for any of it. Because, I mean, the credits roll over 2 women dancing on a bridge with a phonograph, and then it just cuts to this bloody room with this woman that you have no idea. And then by the end of the movie, like, you don't know who the woman in white is, but you at least know who the people that come in later are. Because it ends up, being part of the group of women that are descending upon this chateau at midnight to do their nefarious deeds. Yeah, to have a ceremony.
And when they introduced this idea, I was thinking, like, is it a coven? Are they witches? Are they really secretly vampires? Even though, Ava and Elizabeth, who are the two women at the chateau, who are kind of like furtively lesbians, but then also really want to sleep with Mark the Bandit. It's very unclear what exactly they are. And I, like, not to spoil the whole movie for anybody, but it's not really a supernatural reason that these women are getting together and that the secret kind of thing that they're doing, it doesn't reduce the horror or
the danger or anything.
The danger of it, yeah.
Yeah, it's like essentially based on things that aristocratic people and used to do. Like they used to drink like a glass of ox blood to cure anemia. There are Rollin films that are genuine vampires. They are lips of blood. They've got the fangs. They're straight up vampires. And this one is not. It gets lumped in, I think, a lot with Rollin's vampire flicks, and it shares a lot of similarities, but it is different. This one just, it has a different vibe to it. It has not a vibe, but yeah, in general, these aren't vampires per se, but they are vampiric, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. It's kind of, because this is sort of made, I guess maybe 10 years after 1968 sort of revolutionary sort of fervor that was going on in Europe. It's very post-hippies because this is 1979. But there is that kind of like class commentary there because these are all wealthy bourgeois women who are drinking blood because it gives them strength. And who do they keep? They usually get, an unfortunate man. So I guess maybe it's also like a commentary on sex and gender and whatnot. But they're like rich and they're going to get away with it. They're going to get away with killing some guy because who's going to do anything to us? We're rich. We have money and status, and we also drink blood.
Right. Yeah. And I love that. I love the socioeconomic aspect of this where it's like talking about, it very bluntly like when Mark towards the end of the movie is going like, you might be able to get away with something like this, but I don't belong to your class of people. I can't have anything to do with this. At the time, he's still not putting two and two together that you're the next victim, dude. You're not part of this.
They're asking you to stick around for a reason,
Mark's not the brightest bulb in the tree,
No, he's a very odd character. There's a scene early on where he double crosses the other robbers, who go by, they're referred to in the script and in the credits as Apaches, or the Apaches. And what's interesting is that the actors who are playing them, looking them up afterwards, they're all porn actors.
Yep. And that's something, especially in like later Rollin movies, you'll see he did a lot of, he worked with a lot of so to get a little bit into Rollin, he did work in porn too, from time to time to, make ends meet between his more personal projects. And he liked to bring his porn actors into his, for lack of a better term, legitimate movies.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. I think that's cool. And honestly, I think like Bridget LaHaye was mostly a pornographic actress until she started being in some of Rollin's more like mainstream movies. And I think she's great in this. She is a presence throughout this entire movie. And her scene where she does pick up the scythe, the poster image is so good. Like it's one of the best scenes in the whole movie. It might be my favorite scene in any Rollin movie that I've seen so far.
So, LaHaye plays the blonde Ava, and then her compatriot, the other chambermaid, is Elizabeth, played by Franca Mai. And the two of them are so well matched in this. Like, they have this conspiratorial giggle that they do. They cling to each other. There's a sex scene with them that's very light and sensual. Like, they just discovered kissing. That's the kind of innocent, but this is, it's a little bit more risque than what you'd see in most films at the time. But Ava, like LaHaye especially, she wears so much on her face. I mean, she doesn't wear much in the movie often, but her expressions, her eyes, and she has this little smirk that happens where she's like, I know I know what's going on and you don't. It's that kind of, I've got plans for you with everything. And like when she goes to the bandits, she kind of gives herself to the bandits along with the money that Mark has stolen from them as kind of like a peace offering almost. Elizabeth and Mark are like, oh, well, she's just going to go and do that to save your life, buddy. And Mark's like, they're just going to kill her. No, they aren't.
No. And that's what I love about like the gender dynamic of this movie is in any other typical kind of movie like this, the women are the ones that are in peril. And, like there's a guy with a gun that breaks into the chateau and they don't seem fazed by it at all. And like you said, this isn't a supernatural movie. They don't have any powers. Like if he shoots them, they're dead, but they don't care. There's this just lackadaisical, oh, it's fine. It's just another dopey man kind of thing that I love that permeates this whole movie. Even with the robbers, Brigitte Lahaye never seems like she feels like she's in any danger. Like she's never concerned for her own well-being because she knows she's going to make it out of it. I mean, because there's a fucking scythe on the wall. Like
there's a part where she says like, I just don't have any fear. I have no fear for this because she already has it worked out in her head that I'm the one in charge. She and Elizabeth, the entire time, Ava and Elizabeth are in control, even though Mark often thinks that he is because he's got the gun and he's the man. Ava's the one who basically gets him naked and on the ground. And Elizabeth has this jealousy that kind of becomes an issue later on. But at no point do you think that these women are really in any danger. It's always just Mark. Something's going to happen to this schlub. And with the bandits, Ava again uses sex to kind of position herself literally into a point where she can take out the leader of the bandits. She stabs him like in a very weird way. I guess she stabs his spleen because it's very French. So it must be his spleen that she's like.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And she goes in at an angle. Like it looks unpleasant. It looks like it goes under the rib cage and you're just like, oh, that doesn't, I bet that smarts.
Yeah. Well, and he's essentially like dying. He's got his death cries, which are very weak, but it's like, and it's almost like, well, he's having an orgasm at the same time. So it's kind of like he doesn't know what to do, but his little death is becoming the big death.
Yeah. Death is very orgasmic in this movie.
It's just there's something like just a complete snide way that Rollin sort of focuses on his women, and that these women are like, we got the upper hand. No matter what happens, we got the upper hand. Only woman in the entire movie who kind of doesn't get that treatment is the female robber.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She's kind of treated like she's an idiot for one, and she gets her end in a very messy way. Although it does have one of my favorite little scenes where she turns around and she has a pocket knife.
Yes.
And Ava's standing there with the sigh. It's a very Crocodile Dundee moment where it's like, you call that a knife? This is a knife. And then they have a little sword fight. And Ava's like, It almost looks like she cuts her arm off at one point and then like slashes her from behind. And it's that big histrionic death scene where she's just screaming to the heavens and then falls. And we're not really sure exactly where she got stabbed. But, and Ava's just standing there with the sigh going like, yeah, I thought so.
Yep. So there's like a little TV show that was on British television called Erotica, and it was about European erotic films. And the very first episode was about Jean Rollin, and it's on my Fascination Blu-ray, and it goes through his entire filmography that it covers. And at one point, he's talking about how he does not like to make gore films. He's like, my films aren't gore films. But you watch something like The Grapes of Death. That is a gory movie. It's a zombie movie. There's a lot of pus and bodily fluids. But like in everything else, even though he's making vampire movies, there's very little in the way of blood. The practical effects in this movie, they sprinkled some fake blood on someone. You think that maybe she gets cut across the eyes, the female robber, but like all it really is just some blood spattered across her face. Like you said, there's no discernible wound or anything like that, which to me just kind of adds to the dreamy nature and the avant-garde quality of it, you know?
That's a big part of, I think, what makes this movie unique, and it sounds like what it makes a lot of other Rollin films unique compared to other sort of horror movies is the just sort of like the poetic nature of this, the very artistic design that he puts into these movies, because they're not made with a lot of money. You know, a lot of the actors are either people that he's worked with in, you know, in other contexts, or in his first film, which was the Rape of the Vampire, were all his friends. I mean, they were all just people that he knew that were like, hey, let's make a movie together. And they did. And it was just, you know, again, very dreamlike, very chaotic, hard to follow. Unfortunately, released on a day when there were riots going on in Paris. So, like, the movie theater got ransacked.
Yeah, he said the premiere of the film was awful. He said people were throwing things at the screen. They were breaking the seats. And I'm just like, I can't imagine being that offended by a movie that would be a thing that I did as an audience member.
Well, but then again, it was like 1967, 1968. Yeah. That was the feel that was going on. Like, they weren't all hippies. They were, you know, protesting angry students and union members.
Tensions were high in France at that time, you know?
Everywhere, I think, was kind of a crazy time altogether. But France
the end
really
of the 60s were rough for a lot of places.
Well, and it's interesting that's how he got his start too. You know, he did a lot of odd jobs, you know, making films and TV, like in support, like production roles up to this point. And then he made his first real movie. Like, he had tried to make a couple movies before this, but they didn't pan out for whatever reason. Like, he ran out of money, or he got another job, or something happened. But like, The Rape of the Vampire was the first one that actually got released, and it got released to that, which is crazy. But he didn't give up, which is pretty cool. And he ended up making, like, in the 60s and 70s, he made at least 10 movies.
Yeah.
That were actually released out for the public. So, like, you had all of his vampire movies, like Rape of the Vampire, The Nude Vampire, Shiver of the Vampires, Requiem for a Vampire. The Iron Rose had no vampires in it.
No, but that one is, I haven't watched that one yet, but I have a friend who's a big Jean Rollin person who, when I discovered him, was like texting me constantly. And he said The Iron Rose is the most Rollin film that Rollin ever made. And I'm like, what does that even mean? So that one's up on my watch list.
You know, definitely, like, most of these, I'm like, when can I watch these? The Demoniac, I think, is the one that I definitely want to see, because that one just is crazy sounding. Lips of Blood, Grapes of Death, which is a zombie film. And then, of course, Fascination came. And then he made like a bunch more movies in the 80s. And even up until, I think his last film was like in 2008.
Yeah,
The Mask
he was making
of Medusa.
them even in the aughts.
Yeah. So he didn't, like, he kept making movies. And even though nothing really hit huge, I think one of his biggest ones was The Grapes of Death. It made the most money. But
it feels like, so Grapes of Death, not to get too off track, but like Grapes of Death is one that I have watched. And that one feels like a really cool companion piece to like Fulci's Zombie, you know? Because it does have kind of that Euro zombie, the like kind of grosser, like, oh, these zombies feel rotten and decayed and really gross, you know, in a way that, like, I love the Romero zombie movies, but like they don't, you know, they're blue-faced people, you know, like these zombies have like stuff falling out of their faces and things, and it's really gross. So like when he says he doesn't do gore movies, I'm like, you might not always do gore movies, but when you do, they hit.
And it's so funny too that he did that, and then he did Fascination, which is the opposite of that. You know, one of the things that he did, that he was dabbling with along with making films, and I got really, you know, excited about this because I'm a comic book nerd. He is one half of the team responsible for this seminal work of French comics history, the Saga of Zem, that came out in 1967. He did the plotting of it, or at least 5 of the 7 chapters, with Nicolas Devil, who did all the drawing and the artwork. And it is a crazy comic, but it's definitely a Rollin type story. Like, aliens from another dimension, an emissary who spends most of the time naked but changing form and going through history and having sex with people to try and bring unity and harmony and enlightenment, and of course then becomes more human, just by accident, and there's a lot of that strangeness in it, and it got apparently too weird for him, so he had to bow out after writing chapter 5. Oh, this is getting too much. But I just thought that was really cool, and apparently they have re-released it in English. They have a translated form, which was really hard to do because so much of it, the actual script and the actual dialogue is written artistically. So there's a lot of work with the lettering that had to be copied when they translated it. So they actually just superimposed. And looking at the way he also makes his films, there was a point where he started getting into having similar imagery. He always has a brunette and a blonde somehow as sort of focal points. Apparently he started that in Requiem for a Vampire, and then it kind of continued from there. So especially going back to Fascination, Ava is the blonde and Elizabeth is the brunette, and they're almost inseparable until the end when Elizabeth turns on Ava.
Which is just a heartbreaking scene, honestly. I don't know. This movie's kind of just heartbreaking in general to me. It's not a feel-good movie.
No, it's not. And there are some funny scenes. There are some interesting scenes where you get kind of caught up in the dreamlike quality, or just the sort of it looks like, again, he just kind of let the camera roll and had the actors just.
Yeah. At one point they're playing a on land Marco Polo game where Mark is running around with a blindfold, feeling a bunch of women up, trying to guess which one they are, and it's
even
just
though 5 of them he just met, he doesn't know these women.
I was like, does he know the names of all of them? Because I don't think he did. I think he just wanted to touch some boobs, honestly.
True, and he ends up. I forget It's the marquise. So basically, the hoitiest of the toitiest of the ladies is the marquise herself, and she, I guess, owns the castle. Everybody kind of is in her orbit. Yeah. And when she shows up, she just she puts her foot down. Ava refers to her as death a couple times. She is death come to us. You can tell this woman does not take shit from anybody.
Yeah.
And yet she allows herself to be humiliated by Mark.
And it feels calculated. The first time I watched this, her whole, I'm going to let you essentially take advantage of me. I'm going to let you treat me like a slave, like a servant. It's such an odd choice for her to make, but it also feels like she is luring him into this false sense of security, which I guess has kind of been the MO for, even Eva and Elizabeth. They've been doing that this whole time, and now it's kind of well, it's my turn to mess with him, but I'm going to mess with him by letting him mess with me. There's just a weird gender dynamic going on here that we talked a little bit before we hit record about how I've watched this movie now 3 times probably in the last 6 months or so. And each time I take more from it, or I start to see the different layers and the angles, but I'm still grappling with this movie and how it makes me feel and what all of it even means,
Again, I've only watched it once for this episode, but I'll definitely be going back to watch it again because there are scenes where I feel like I missed something. He sets everything up very beautifully. And you described the opening where there's the credits rolling and there's 2 women who we come to learn as Ava and Elizabeth dancing on the bridge to the chateau. Right before that, in this very strange, it's not even a scene, but this very strange moment, there's this giant book, this giant sort of medieval tome that's being slowly opened up, and each page is just being sort of turned by pushing it, and there's this very ASMR heavy sound effect of the page turning each time, and there doesn't seem to be any rhyme and reason to it, but apparently it's something that he wanted to put into a previous movie, into Demoniacs actually, where it was supposed to be sort of a narrative device where the pages would turn and it would introduce the characters. Each page would be a new character, and there'd be a narrator that's describing what's on the page, telling, the audience about what character that is. He doesn't do that here. He didn't get to do that in that movie, but here he puts that book in, and really all it does is it gives you this very loud, unsettling textural experience while watching that. Just the pages turning and hearing that so loudly and so distinctly. And it doesn't even sync up with the actual pages turning. Like there's
No,
just
it
the
doesn't.
sound over like pages turning and then just page turn. It's very strange and it doesn't fit with anything else. You never see that book in the movie. The book doesn't, it's not in the castle. It doesn't look like it's in the chateau. They don't refer to it at any other point, but it's kind of like this weird, unsettling thing that puts you off kilter. Of course, the next big scene after the credits is woman in white standing in the middle of an abattoir, surrounded by blood.
And the sound design in that scene is really good too, because it's like
you hear the dripping.
The dripping, you hear like the kind of clinking of the chains gently like rocking back and forth, and it's just there's just we talked about the visuals being so good and like the way he frames things, but like the sound design and the Foley work in this is genuinely like a part of the experience too, in the service of that dreamlike, hazy kind of atmosphere that he just loves to work in.
It almost puts you off balance sometimes. So like towards the end where Elizabeth kind of reveals the whole thing to Mark after they've run away. She's shot Ava. They're in it's actually, I forget the French word for it. Like they said, like pigeonniere or something like that. It's basically a place where all the pigeons were kept.
Yeah.
So it's just this giant echoey chamber filled with all these round holes, these repetitive round holes. So if you have I forget what the phobia is, beware of that scene because it's just all these holes and the camera focuses on all of them before it finds the two actors. But the sound in that is so off-putting. It's just grating and awful. It's just the sound of like birds screaming, just repetitively screaming for must be like 3 minutes of just that.
And especially after watching like an hour and 10 minutes of this movie being a lot of sex. Like there's almost like a sexual, like you almost hear that and are like, am I hearing two people like going at it right now? Am I hearing, like it's kind of one of those weird, what am I listening to before you realize what it is? Yeah. And I love that because he never shows the birds either. Like it's never like, you never see any birds, but they're there because the sound's there.
Exactly. And but it puts you off balance as a viewer. You know that just like in a dream where you think you know what's happening, you think you know what's going on, there's something that's not right. There's something that invades that sense of security and comfort that puts you in like maybe a more receptive frame of mind because something's got you on edge. Now you want to pay attention to something. Like there's got to be something else to focus on in here. And of course it is. It's an important scene where Elizabeth lays out the whole plot, but also basically tells Mark that, I've been pretending more or less that I'm in love with you, but really I just want to fucking kill you myself.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and that's the thing. Like when she does that reveal, she doesn't even reveal. Like she goes, "I don't think I ever loved you. I think what I liked about you was," and then she just stops and she walks away. Like she gives him no closure. She gives us no closure. It's just like, oh, that is cold. That is like, I don't know. Her whole third act. Like, I don't know what's going on in Elizabeth's head. There's a lot of poetic, the dialogue in a lot of this is stilted and kind of, cheesy and stuff. But when you get into the back half of this movie, some of the dialogue is truly just kind of poetic and haunting. The thing that she says to Mark before she kills him is like, blood is the life that flows in you, but it's also death when it escapes. A true symbol of life and death. Perhaps there's no going back once it's touched your lips. And it's like, oof, I don't know. It's one of the best lines in any vampire movie that I can think of. I'm like, that's like on par with I've crossed oceans of time to find you. Like,
and this is coming 20, well, maybe not 20 years, but like 12, 13 years before Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah.
Where basically he's, and Rollin is a poet. Like, I mean, he's an author and a poet as well as being a filmmaker. And he makes sure that poetry, those thoughts, that philosophy kind of makes it into his films. He's not making standard popular fare. He doesn't set out to I mean, of course he wants to make some money off of it. Like there is that sort of like bohemian, oh, I don't care, this doesn't make any money because it is my art, but there's also I want to keep making movies, so I need to make some money off of this. And so he puts he puts a lot of himself into it. And it's really disappointing for him every time that a movie doesn't do well. And this one was all set to be a huge hit. And he had a distribution company that was like, yeah, we're going to put it in all these movie theaters. It's going to be all over Paris. This is going to hit it big, especially after the Grapes of Death did so well. We're going to make sure this one does well too. So your fans are going to grow. Apparently, one of the directors of the distribution company had like some kind of grudge or whatever against a producer on the movie and canceled all the bookings right before the premiere.
Days before.
Like it was right there. And so they tried to pull something together. Somebody, one of the distributor, like people who was involved with distributors, like tried to pull strings to help out, to get it at least into some sort of indie screens, but it was too little too late. They made no money. They made no money back. They lost everything on this. And so he was like, all right, back to the porn grind,
Mm-hmm.
Which
and
was
that's
so sad.
It's heartbreaking because this is, I mean, granted, I haven't seen all of them, but like this is widely considered his best movie. I think this is a damn near, like, I don't know. I'm going to say it's damn near perfect. I really love this movie. It's not perfect, but there's a feeling that it evokes in me that I can't deny,
Mm-hmm.
and for this movie to have come that close to having some kind of success for him, and for him to maybe have one fucking lucky break in his entire career that was full of setbacks, and then for that to happen, it's devastating.
Thankfully, he never stopped making movies. Like he kept until the year he passed away. He died in 2010, and he had a movie out in 2009. That was The Mask of Medusa. Was his last movie. But he had been putting out stuff in the aughts. He put out stuff in a couple things in the 90s and in the 80s that were becoming a little bit more recognized and more mainstream. Like people were picking up on his work and then looking back and saying like, oh, you did these really cool things in the 60s and 70s. You just didn't get as much recognition back then. But I think with Fascination, if things hadn't gone down as shitty as they did with the distributors, I think he would have been on a very different path. And this movie would have gotten him that recognition and that fame elsewhere other than sort of like the art communities in France and, in parts of Europe. He would have probably gotten a lot more international recognition. But instead he had to keep grinding quite some time before, the rest of the world kind of caught up to him and saying like, oh yeah, you're pretty cool.
Yeah. And I feel like even then, like, I mean, on the Blu-ray that I have of Fascination, there's an essay from the guy who runs the label talking about his friendship with Rollin, how he had done certain things with earlier releases from outdated formats, but that Rollin never got to see HD remasters and the Blu-ray releases of all of these movies that have sparked this new generation of fans. And it's just kind of sad that he never got to see how loved and appreciated these films are these days. And, I still think that you still go up to most people and are like, oh, Jean Rollin, and they're like, who? But like, he is starting to, like, there's a subsect. I mean, he had a whole front page on Shudder for like 2 weeks where it was just the recently added was just all his stuff. Tyrion Channel ran a thing on his works, and it's on a bunch of them are on Canopy now. They're starting to become more widely accessible, and I feel like I'm starting to see on Letterboxd people discovering these movies, and it's so exciting. But I'm like, God, I wish he knew,
Mm-hmm.
I wish he knew that this is what happened.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Fulci when we were talking about the Grapes of Death being sort of another, probably the most easily comparable kind of zombie style. But Fulci and the Italian horror masters, like, people knew them then because they had the distribution, they had the word of mouth, like people were bringing those movies across the pond so that we could see them and they could, have a reach there. They also, across the other pond too, because like they're big in Japan. So like you had a lot of people seeing the Italian horror masters. Obviously there were some Spanish masters too, but Rollin didn't get that, unfortunately. Like he missed all of that. And, I'm going to, again, put my foot down and say, if it wasn't for the shady backroom dealings with the Fascination distribution, this would have put him on the map. And people would have been able to look back. They would have made his earlier movies more available, distribution internationally. And it's not like they didn't get distributed internationally. Some of them did. Like there were English versions. There were, heavily edited versions that showed up in places like in the UK, but not to the extent. It still remained tiny art house. If you know, but not really with the greater horror fandom that could have taken this and run with it in the early 80s. I
agree. And that's why, look, I don't want people to listen to this episode and think that all I watch are like these obscure French movies, because that is not. I'm wearing a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle shirt, for God's sake. But you were asking like what's something kind of cool that you like. Well, right now, what I like, what I'm getting into is this. And I want people to, if people listen to this episode and they go watch Fascination and they hate it, at least they watched Fascination. At least they know who Jean Rollin is. Like, I'm not saying everybody's going to love this. It's not a movie for everybody, but he's worth looking into, and he's worth giving a shot to, because he is an auteur of cinema, and he's unfortunately he's kind of one of the forgotten auteurs of cinema. And so discovering him in the last year has just been it's been a joy. I love it. So
yeah, I agree. I'm very grateful. Thank you again for telling me about this movie and having me watch it so that we could talk about it, because this is why I have this podcast, so I can be schooled and I can be introduced to really cool things that I didn't know about. But this one, I knew nothing about, and now I need to see more Jean Rollin movies. I need to really see what else he's done.
Yeah.
So, but thank you again. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about this with me.
Well, thank you for giving me the platform to talk about it, because I appreciate it. I've been telling everybody specifically about this movie. I'm like, go watch it. I don't know. You might hate it, but go watch it anyways.
You've just listened to another episode of The Bear Cave of Terror. And if you haven't seen Fascination, or after listening to us, are struck with an irresistible compulsion to watch it again, it is streaming on Shudder, the Criterion Channel, Philo, and a couple other subscription streaming platforms. It's also available to purchase digitally and on physical media, including the recent, very beautiful HD remaster on Blu-ray. And Sam, if listeners would like to get in touch, how would they do that?
Yeah, you can get in touch with me through Screams from the Basement. We're on pretty much every social media channel except for Twitter. We jumped that ship. But Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky, we're on all of it. So just search Screams from the Basement, because we have a long name and our handles different on every single one of them.
I kind of know what that's like, because mine is Bear Cave of Terror, which you can follow Bear Cave of Terror on Blue Sky and Instagram at Bear Cave of Terror, all one word, or send an email to bearcaveofterror@gmail.com. And of course, as usual, a list of sources will be available in the show notes if you'd like to learn more about Fascination, or the entire works of Jean Rollin. And remember, people think I'm crazy and a degenerate, but I'm just a little special. Good night, everybody.
Je vous offre mon innocence en échange de ma vie.
Faites-moi tout ce que vous voulez, mais épargnez cet enfant.
Je vous en prie, monsieur le bandit, ne nous tuez pas.